In this session, I will first explain on overhead applied, whether the business have overestimated or underestimated their additional cost, the overheads. Then I will explain how to prepare work in progress account, and then later factory overhead account. To calculate the cost of the production and then add the profit to it and give the selling price to the customer, the business has to do the job cost card. And in doing the job cost card, we know actually how much or how many materials we are going to need. It can be exact, and we can also know exactly how many hours we will be spending on it. However, there are other costs that we call it overhead cost or with the additional cost that we can't just tell exactly how much will be spent. So for that reason, business calculates a rate. And as we have done earlier, we calculated the rate using a cost driver, and that cost driver depended on what the business is using the most. If business is labor intensive, then we used labor hours or labor cost as cost driver. And if it was more of capital intensive, then we used machine hours or machine cost as our cost driver. Now, in calculating the predetermined rate, we estimated our overhead, and then we estimated our cost driver. We divided those two to get a rate. Using that rate, we calculated our overhead, and that overhead was used in job cost card to identify exactly how much was the total cost. However, as I explained, we estimated our overhead, we estimated our cost driver, so that overhead that we are writing in the job cost card, it's not the exact amount. Materials and labor hours, labor cost can be exact. However, this was estimated, so it will not be exact. So in this case, when we actually do the production, then we'll be able to identify and differentiate. This is what we estimated, and this is what was the actual. So if we have estimated more than we have over applied, our actual cost was less. However, using the predetermined rate, we estimated that it will be more. So our overhead is over applied. We have overestimated. It can also happen that we underestimate. We calculated the rate using estimated overhead and cost driver, and we calculated our factory overhead. That can be under applied too. We estimated less, whereas actual incurred was more. So in this case, we have under applied. And if you under apply, that means in our job cost card, we said, oh, our additional cost will be less. So in other words, if we have estimated that our additional cost will be less, what happens? Our total cost will be less. And if our total cost is less, we'll end up selling at a lower price. But when we do the production, we identify, oh, exactly our overhead, the additional cost was more. So what will happen? We may make less profit. So if we underestimate, then we may lose out. We may make less profit. And if we we overestimate and write up larger cost for overhead, then our selling price will be higher. In that case, if we are over applied, what will happen? Our selling price will be higher, and customers may move to our competitors because they find we are selling at a higher price. So in both ways, there's some advantage and some disadvantage. If we over apply, our selling price will be high, we'll start losing the customers. And if we under apply, we estimated less and actual was more. In that case, we may end up making a loss or lesser profit. So if actual overhead is more, actual that actually incurred while we started the production, when we finished the production, we found out that our additional cost actually was more and applied was less. We estimated was less. In that case, it's under applied. That means our cost was low. We thought our cost will be low. And in this case, our cost of goods sold will be more and will be making less profit. And if we our actual was less and we thought it will be more, actual was less, but we applied, we thought, we estimated it will be more. In this case, we have over applied. And if we over apply, that means we think our cost will be high. And if cost is high, our cost of goods sold will show less and our profit will be less. Now let's look at this example. In this example, this is a mechanical business. A mechanic discovered overhead for the year where these are the actual ones. His rent was 45,000 for the year, insurance 7,000, electricity 9,000, and wages 32,000. And this was their labor cost. That was the labor hours they used during the year. These were exactly how many parts they have used. And this is their work in progress. Work in progress means at the beginning or last year, what was left, we still didn't finish it, we bring it to this year. So that's work in progress. For example, end of December, we were still doing the construction. So that construction hasn't finished. It will continue this year. So it's called work in progress. And whatever is completed, that's called a finished good. Now let's look at the question. Now in this one, we have to draw work in progress account. To prepare work in progress account, the columns we have is date, particulars, debit, credit, and balance. It is a ledger account. And beside it, I have just placed the question. Now to prepare work in progress account, you can write the date, whatever date is given in the question. First thing, we'll have the balance. Balance that was at the end of last year, we have to bring it in this year. So it can be Jan 1st. And if it is a balance, it goes straight in a balance column. And if we look at the question, it says here work in progress had an opening balance of 12,000. So we write 12,000 and it will always be a debit balance. Then we transfer materials that's being used in that particular job, the direct materials being used. And if it's being transferred, it will go in the debit column. And if you look at the question, these were the parts for that mechanic that he has used during the year. So it comes to 100. Now we had a debit balance and there is a debit entry. So if it's debit and debit, you will add. So we had 12,000 and another 100,000. So we are using 112,000. To date, we have used in that particular job and still it will be a debit balance. Then you also add the direct labor that has been used in that particular job. And direct labor amount will also go in debit column. It will be the cost, the dollar amount, not the hours. So the dollar amount we have used is 128,000. Again, it was a debit balance and a debit entry. So we are going to add. Now we have placed in some more cost to that particular job. So our cost will increase. Now we need to write in what we estimate, what we think will be our additional cost. That's called our overhead costs, or we say factory overhead. Now to get this amount, first we need to calculate overhead rate. In this example, I have already calculated overhead rate as $1 per hour. It is based, our cost driver in this question is labor hours. So actual labor hours used was 6,200 and the rate we estimate is $1. So our factory overhead will come to 6,200. Rate times the actual cost driver, and in this case our cost driver is direct labor hours. So rate that we have calculated multiplied by the actual hours that the workers have used, we get our factory overhead. So our new balance will become, so during the year this much we have used in the production of a particular item, and then we write down how much we have completed. So the finished goods, how much we have completed, and in this case jobs that were finished during the year was 315. It's completed, so we have to minus it from that work in progress. It's now complete, so put the amount in a credit column so we can minus it out. So finished goods was 315,000, but in this question I have to change this rate because otherwise my answer will go incorrect at the end. So I'll just change this rate from $1 to 20. So if I change the rate from $1 to 20, so $20 times 6,200, it will come to, so it comes to 124,000, and 240 plus 124 will come to 364,000. Now this was in progress. At the end of the year, this much was completed. So we'll minus debit balance and a credit entry. This in this question, in this part, a debit balance and a credit entry, we're going to minus to find the new balance. So from the progress, this much we have already used, direct materials, direct labor and overhead, and this much has been completed. So minus it out, how much is still in progress, that's what the amount we will get. So 49,000 is still in progress and it's still a debit balance. So this is how we prepare work in progress account. Now to prepare factory overhead control account, again it's a ledger account, so it has date, particulars, debit, credit and balance. This account records actual cost, the additional cost the business had. So you can write the date when it took place and what were the additional cost that business had. So in our question, the additional cost we have is workshop rent. First, we put it in debit column, 45,000, and it goes directly into credit, sorry, in the balance column, and it will be set as a debit balance. Insurance is another additional cost we had. Again, it goes in debit column, and as we did previously, debit and debit we add, so we'll get the new balance. Similarly, there is another additional cost, electricity. Again, it will go in debit